Hey everyone, welcome back to the Product Pivot. My name is Santi, and I have my amazing co host Megan with me to do a little recap about what this podcast is. We share real stories from folks in product management and all kinds of different roles in this space, and they're hearing their stories and their insights through these episodes. So today I am very, very excited to have Steve on with us today, and I'm going to flip it over to him so he can give an introduction about himself.
Great. Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm Steve Johnson. I have spent the last 30 years of my career coaching product management teams, including working closely on a couple of things with Santi, which is great. I live in Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. And since, 5 years before COVID, I became a million miler on two airlines. So I've basically stopped flying.
I love that little tidbit. That's great.
So there
So
we
wait,
go.
did you stop flying because you hit that milestone, or you were just kind of like, this is enough flying for me?
Yeah, I think 2 million miles is the a good stopping place. It was kind of cool. United gave me lifetime premier or whatever, and also for a friend, and I my daughter, so she can get upgraded. And she's a product manager, a director of product management. So she does a lot of traveling. And when she went on her honeymoon, she got upgraded and he didn't.
Oh
And
no.
I was like, this could be a teaching moment, right? Instead, she said, "Oh, let me give it to somebody else, and I'll go sit with my husband." But I was like, you could have established a whole new set of ground rules otherwise. But anyway, uh, flying isn't any worse now as before. It's a lot of miles.
Yeah.
That is a
But
lot.
come on, United. That was not a great user experience. Could have improved that a little bit.
Oh, I don't know. I
Just
think
saying.
there's a lot to be said for, separating couples on the airplane.
This is going to be part of the podcast after hours talk.
No, I love that. And so being in product management for 30 years, can you share a little bit about like your journey getting into product management and how you got into the industry? Because that's a long time.
hmm Well, the slightly longish sort of story. In college, I majored in marketing and minored in computer science. And when I graduated, I sent out 300 resumes and got 299 rejections and one interview to be a programmer. So I was a programmer for a couple of years, and my boss one day said, "I don't think you're going to like being a programmer." And I'm like, "Oh, wait, are you firing me?" And he's like, "Your work is," but he hooked me up with a buddy of his who was hiring sales engineers, which is a job I'd never even heard of. So I interviewed, got the job, and began my week after week after week of being on the airplanes. But it was a great job. I mean, I learned how to work with people and work with technology and really enjoyed it. And then I, I found that I was I found that I was doing a lot more of selling than sales engineering. And so I moved into sales and was selling a product that I had actually used. And suddenly I skyrocketed to the top of the charts for sales on that product. And my boss said, "Dude, I don't know what you did, but could you train the rest of the Virginia office?" So we had a, Saturday lunch and learn kind of thing. And suddenly my office is outselling the rest of the country. And the VP of sales calls me and says, "Dude, I don't know what you did to Virginia, but do it to the other offices." So I went on this nationwide tour that I remember only for the foods that I ate. I went to Chicago and had their crazy wagon wheel, thick stuffed pizza, and went down to North Carolina and had some pork barbecue. And then I went to Texas and had some beef barbecue or brisket. And I had in Denver. Ultimately ended up in Los Angeles, which is the corporate headquarters, and had some really good sushi. But I was teaching this sales class in LA, and the VP of marketing came in And, at a break, he came over and said, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm just a sales guy from Virginia out here training the salespeople. And he said, well, that's not your job. That's product management's job. And I said, well, why isn't product management doing it? And he said, well, that's a really good point. So would you join my team as a product manager? And so that's how I stumbled, as most of us do, stumbled into this product management role. So I did. I had a really good first experience. I sat down with the dev team and I said, I really want to do well here. How can I best contribute? And they said, tell us why. Tell us about the problems you're encountering. Tell us what customer we're trying to serve. Give us information about where deals are falling apart because of product capabilities. And I'm like, oh shoot, I know how to do all that. So I did that for a while, and we did really well. And then I took a second job as a director. And then I was a VP, and a buddy of mine called me and said, hey, I've started pragmatic marketing. And I've been doing it for a couple of years. I need some help. Would you like to join me? So I joined Pragmatic in 95 or 96 and worked there for 15 years, and then found that companies needed more than just training. They really needed the ongoing coaching. And so I started my own company, Product Growth Leaders, and kind of flipped training on its head a little bit. It was more, and Santi knows this. It's more, let's have a discussion, and then let's apply that thing right now before you lose it. Because one of the things I've learned is, if you don't use a technique in a week, you forget. And
so true.
I've been in a lot of training sessions where it's like 2 or 3 or 4 days of talk with no do, right? And so we try to minimize the talk and maximize the working.
How do you apply that in like a virtual environment?
I'm sorry?
How do you apply that in a virtual environment?
It's actually easier, I think. The ideal scenario would be for all of us to be transported to a place for an hour. Logistics don't work. So I had a call years ago, a VP of product management for his team. So I've got 13 product managers in 13 different cities on 3 different continents. And bringing them together will cost more than the training. So can you do something over the web? And I said, oh, of course I can. And then figuring out how you do something over the web. I was like, the third user of Zoom. But the that I evolved to, let's say, is like a 20-minute discussion with some slides, followed by a 20-minute breakout of let's do this thing in teams, and then a 20 review of the work that was done, and then a 15 minutes more to talk about a homework assignment. So then kind of like college, right? You go to a lecture or you go to a lab, and then you go home and you do homework, and then come together, you review your homework. And so we do that like 10 times, just kind of like college.
So Santi, I mean, you've been part of this, I imagine, like because he actually has been a coach for Life Raft, which is where you work, for anyone who doesn't know. Can you share a little bit about how that has impacted you and the work that you've done, and how that virtual environment, like, does it work? I mean, he's right here, so you're probably not going to talk anything negative about his work, but I guess I'm just curious.
No, that's like it. No, Steve's actually really great because he wants, like a lot of product people, he wants the honest feedback. But honestly, I found it to be really helpful because it's that beautiful blend of getting to ask the questions from like a real human, because sometimes these online courses that we do kind of on our own pace. Like we do pick things up from them, but we do miss that kind of like element of having a coach or a teacher to ask questions about. And Steve will tell you all right now, listeners, we ask questions. um, and it's nice because it does apply that the doing of it. So each week we get homework that we do, and we do it. We make sure we do it and we apply it, and then it really does just stick better for us. And like, so we've done this. We're on our third course with Steve at this point this year. It's been phenomenal, and there's stuff from like the first course we did back earlier in the year that we like remember, and it's ingrained in us now because we've done that course. We did the actual practice of it, like the work of it. We talked to Steve, asked questions in the calls, and we worked together as a team to implement what Steve was teaching us. So I personally have nothing but good things to say about Steve and the work he's doing. I'm ecstatic. I think he's a phenomenal product leader and someone in this space, and he's always sharing some really good advice. So shameless plug, go check out Product Growth Leaders. You want some software training.
That reminds me, I had a situation last year or the year before. I've always tried to do like teamwork, individual work, right? My focus is on let's get this team working together. And it coalesced for me in this one scenario. I was working with a team of, I don't know, a dozen or so people. It just made a big rant on the importance of having firsthand experience with customers. I mean, AI is great. Secondary research is great. Feedback from sales is great. You know, there are lots of listening posts here, but the visceral impact of watching somebody do their job or do their job with your product is mind blowing. So anyway, I made the point, and Santi is agreeing with that point. And so one of the guys on the call immediately said, "Well, and I knew where this was going." You know, he was like, "Yeah, it takes a lot of time." And anyway, he said, "Well, I get a lot of good information from Salesforce, and I'm all set to shut him down." I mean, fine. Getting secondary research is fine, but it's not primary research. And so I was all set with my answer. And everybody else on the call said, "Well, wait a minute. How do you have access to Salesforce?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I used to be a sales engineer. Then I moved into product management, and now I've still got my login." And one of the other guys said, "Oh, you know, that's right. I moved here from support, and I've still got access to the support system." And everybody else on the call was like, "Oh gosh, you have access to the support system." And that would never have come out of you going to a public seminar all by yourself. And so I just see a lot of opportunities where one product manager has a question for me, but a second product manager answers it. You know, they're like, "Hey, here's the way we do it here." And so it's like, it's not like preaching, you know, it's like, well, I guess the analogy is best is I feel like I get in the boat and fish with you. I don't tell you how to fish, and I don't fish for you, right? And what I find from these discussions is how much domain knowledge the team has, and they can say, the way you've done that is wrong for this company, which I can't necessarily say, if that makes sense.
Hey everyone, it's Santi popping in real quick to talk about Prodfolio. As we know, storytelling is a massive part of product management, but sometimes we struggle to tell our own. Meg and I are no exception, and after having many conversations with other product people, we noticed a trend. Lots of other PMs struggle to tell their story too. So like this podcast, Meg and I set off to help close this gap we were seeing, which is where Prodfolio comes in. Prodfolio is a portfolio building tool that helps product managers tell their story in a way that hiring managers are actually interested in seeing, all in a fraction of the time as other methods. Show your work, own your impact. Link in the description.
No, it does. I think every person that we talk to, the companies do product management differently. Every single person that we talk to, it's different
And
everywhere.
you know, I think there's only 20% of product managers have had a product management training. So 80% of the companies are making it up, you know, based on, you know, I read a book or I watched a bunch of videos. And so I think one of the things we're seeing right now is a lot of people are saying, well, we don't need a product manager anymore. We'll just get AI to do that.
Yeah.
And the developers who have worked with strong product managers say, I need more product managers, not less.
Yeah.
I need not fewer. Um, and it was an article that was making the rounds a couple of months ago of a pundit who was saying we really need one product manager per dev lead now,
Wow.
instead of one product manager for dev team, because some of these dev leads uh, are getting a lot of productivity gains from AI, much more than product managers are.
Wow.
That is a really fascinating stat. So I want to dig into just one thing there that you said about devs working with good PMs and strong PMs and how they actually advocate for having more of those folks around. Out of all the years you've been in product and the things that you've done and the people you've trained, what in your expertise your professional opinion makes a good PM a good PM? Like, what are those characteristics or skills or traits that these product people have that make them stand out as really strong product people?
I think the number one thing is a business mindset rather than a technology mindset. And I'm pretty technical. I mean, a lot of people say, "Hey, should a product manager be a programmer?" Well, I've met good former programmers, including myself, who became good product managers. Um, but you don't have to be a coder. You don't have to be a programmer. You have so, for instance, one way of responding kind of sideways to that is you have to be more technical than a sales rep, but not as technical as a programmer.
Yeah.
But you have to understand the conversations you're in, and not just the conversations you're in with development. You have to understand the conversations you're having with marketing and sales and support and success. So having this kind of knowledge of how all the departments work and how you can support support those departments is more important than being able to go deep on technical. Um, I went all over the place there. Did I actually answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was good because that's a debate that we still hear in the community today. Like,
Yeah.
do I need to, like, a lot of PMs I know are, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are definitely a chunk of PMs I know that are picking up coding courses and stuff because they
Mhm.
feel like it's necessary. And I will never say like don't do I've done a couple Python
Yeah.
programs, right? Like, just to get, it's sometimes nice just to have that little correspondence with your devs and kind of just get the pain points they might be having, because I had quite a
Mhm.
few. But I don't preach that you need to do that, because to your point, it's not just about understanding the technical aspect of it. You do need to understand those conversations with the devs at like a general level, but it really is more about just having the different like the different ways of understanding how each department works and like fusing that together for kind of a holistic picture, which is why I
Mhm.
think a lot of folks that pivot into product from different areas of a business, they can succeed really well. For example, I went through CS and development myself, like as a QA analyst before I went into product. So it gave me like a really interesting overarching view of a company that helped me understand product even better. So that just was kind of validating in that sense. Meg, was there anything that you wanted to add to that, or another question you wanted to spin up?
No, I think you totally covered it. I guess I would kind of like to ask like a differing question, but on the same topic. Like, what are bad habits you see in PMs?
The worst habit I see is product managers telling other people how to do things. I think General Patton, who said, "Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what you need, and they'll amaze you with their ingenuity." And over the years, I've had so many instances where people, and you have too, where people say, "Hey, could you just add a button here, or could you just do this one little thing?" And it's like, well, hang on, what problem are you trying to solve? And they're like, "No, no, no, just build this, right?" And this happens to developers all the time. It's the VP of sales, it's the VP of, it's the product manager, it's the CEO, and they all come in and say, "Build me a feature." And as somebody who has done development, it's like, well, I don't understand why you want that feature. So when it comes down to me using my judgment, I'm guessing what problem you're trying to solve. And as it turns out, I remember one of my favorite stories. I had professional services came to me and said, we need a new user interface. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. So tell me what problem you're dealing with. And the way we had set this thing up was pretty funny, to be honest with you. Because it was a secured environment, the implementation team had to work inside a secured area around regular people. And so what was happening was they're trying to do their work, and every idiot in the place would come over and say, hey, show me what you're doing. Hey, how long is it going to take you? And, could you give me a little training? Because I'm going to be using this later on. And they're like, this is no part of this project. And, you're driving me insane here. And I can't remember what I was working on when you interrupted me. So I think we can all do that. But they described their scenario. And I then sat down with my dev lead and I said, Todd, here's what I'm hearing, that one of the problems is our UI is designed for novices. So it's doing sorts of checking and it's got a wizard, and it pops up periodically and says, are you sure you met, and it was really good for novices, but our professional services guys are not novices. So he came back and said, hey, this will sound a little crazy, but what if we gave them a 3-column spreadsheet of the first column is the thing you're trapping, the second column is what you want to do about it, and the third column is the parameters. And I'm like, that can't possibly work. Let's try it. So we did this bulk load thing with one of the professional services guys, and he went crazy for it. I mean, there's no UI at all. It's use Excel or whatever spreadsheet you like. And what we saw is implementation time went from 3 months to 3 weeks. Oh. And the accidental result is we built this big library of things we knew. And so subsequent implementations went so much faster. And at the end of the day, it really was, again, professional services says, give me a thing. And Todd and I had a discussion about what they're really trying to address. And it really, from a business standpoint, it was, really, how do we reduce the friction for the professional services team to get in through?
It makes a ton of sense. It's kind of crazy though.
Like, it just really nails it for me that things can be done in product management that aren't obvious, but it is product management and it's serving a actual need or solving a real pain point. And it's not something that someone would think of right away. So that story, just to me, I'm like, see, like, that's such a cool, like, tangible product that you delivered on, just not in like the conventional way, which I thought was really fascinating when I first heard that story. And there was like a real outcome tied to that. It went from 3 months of implementation time to 3 weeks. Like, that is phenomenal.
Yeah. And like, I feel like solutions like that never come to my mind. It's like, as soon as you talk to an engineer, they're like, save me time. This is a great idea. And I feel like that once you test them, they're usually very efficient, which is so cool. I feel like you just need that like engineering perspective and partnership with a product person, and really just all comes together.
And, I think that's going to be one of the flaws we see. AI are saying, well, maybe we can have this new role called a product engineer, which is a product manager who is also the engineer, or an engineer who is also the product manager. And what's missing there is a discussion. It's the sitting down with Todd and saying, hey, here's what I'm hearing. There's a lot of friction. And I love that word, friction. What we as product managers do, if we're like acting in the best interest of the business of the product, is identifying and resolving friction. And that means the customer gets confused when they're purchasing. They don't know how to configure it. So what's the best way to solve that? Maybe in the short term, we have some lunch and learns with the sales engineers so they do a better job of configuring. But in the longer term, make it simpler or make it configurable in a different way. And I had a wonderful similar experience. I had done win-loss analysis and had found that the sales guys were often getting dinged by the customer for not being technical enough. And, some of the sales guys would say, I don't know. And many of them would say in their heads, I don't know, but let me make up something, so that was pretty disturbing. And so I sat down with my counterpart in marketing and I said, so here's this friction thing happening. And I was thinking maybe we need to do like some more technical training for the sales team. And she said, oh no, give them a sales tool with that information in it. And so what she did is she sat our CTO down in front of a camera and recorded him answering the most common questions the sales team was getting from customers. And so, a sales team, a customer would say something like, well, I really like to know a little bit more about how you do multi-tenant, bi-directional, 256 whatevers, and the sales guy would say, well, I believe I've got a video for this. Let's go look at my laptop, and they would play the video with our CTO and everybody was like doing their right thing. The sales guy wasn't supposed to be doing tech speak. And the CTO was, but the old way would have been to fly the CTO to bring this important account into the corporate office or something expensive like that. And that experience completely changed my relationship with marketing because I realized they're too.
Yeah.
I've got a sales problem. I've got a buyer problem. Let me sit down with these experts in communication and persuasion and present them this friction and then brainstorm how we might best solve it.
That's a good one.
Just to rant one more little bit. And marketing has the same. Every jackass comes in and says, can you build me a brochure? I need a web page. I need a subweb. I need an event. I need, and if you come in and say, hey, I've got this problem that I think has a communication solution, then suddenly they can use their brilliance.
I think that's a struggle with designers as well. I think a lot of the time with designers, like UI, UX, like experts, we want to tell them how to do something and we don't give them the space to be creative. And I see that a lot, especially like I work in a lot of small startups. And I think that the experience that I've had at multiple companies, but also just like I've heard from others in the startup community, is that when a product is your baby, it can be really hard as like the CEO, COO, CTO, whatever role is in an executive seat to let that go and let a designer be a designer. Let them be an expert of what that product looks like. You want to have very strong input. And I've heard that from a lot of people within that startup community. And I don't know if you've experienced that, Steve. I don't know if you have that in like, if you've had smaller companies you've worked for, larger companies you've worked with. But I feel like that is one of those roles that you should let be creative. That's what they're good at.
Right. I think the problem is, and I'll get this quote from Steve. Design isn't how it looks. Design is how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so, little things like in your iPhone or in your phone app, you've got a toggle on or off. And then some idiot says, I'd like to have a maybe option. Well, now it's a vastly more complex control. Yeah. And that's just, and imagine you've got 40 of those. And yet a designer would look at that and say, let's understand what the customer is trying to accomplish and maybe solve it in an entirely different way. Instead of doing a whole bunch of flags, Maybe you do a do not disturb that turns on this set of flags behind the scenes. And it's just making it's really thinking about how it needs to work. And I was on a Reddit forum. Let me say that again. It was actually Facebook. Not that it matters at all. But anyway, thing. And somebody, every day or so would post, what's your favorite prototyping? No, as a product manager, what is your favorite prototyping tool? And say Figma, blah 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 blah. And I popped in and said, qualified design is my favorite prototyping tool.
I love that.
And it's like this has happened. This has happened over my career, kind of on and off. The first product manager I ever met, it was in 1985. She had an MBA. She wrote business plans, wrote requirements documents that had no features in them. The requirements documents always have been, what outcomes are we trying to achieve, as opposed to here's a feature, here's a feature, here's a feature. And then I love the idea of Agile, but in that time frame, in the early 2000s, maybe it was the .com, maybe it was the Agile movement, I'm not sure, but product managers got tasked with project management and design and all the things that developers don't want to do. I was in a conference around that time, and somebody in the room said, how would you define product management? And I was all set. I had a finish. And one of the guys on the panel said, yeah, product management's job is to do everything nobody else wants to do. And I'm like, okay, that is wrong, And so during that time frame, in the early 2000s, we saw product managers become product owners. Product owners are sort of secretaries, administrators, project managers. They're doing a lot of things. They're doing some things that are in fact product management, but most of what they're doing is what we used to call business analyst, like converting requirements into tasks for development. And I'm seeing it move back now. I'm seeing kind of a split. There's a growing number of people who recognize product management's role in defining. And equally so, there are a bunch of us that are saying, well, now I don't need developers anymore. I can do my own vibe coding, so there's yet another split going on. And I think 18 months from now, we're going to come back to our senses. I mean, AI is huge, but it shouldn't turn product managers away from being expert on the market, on friction, expert on the business. And those product managers need to work with a partner to identify the best way to address friction.
For sure. And Santi, I guess I'd be curious, like, would that be relevant for our question about like pivoting into product today? Because I feel like AI is part of that, but it's also like kind of its own thing. So I'd be curious, Santi, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it is a good question. That's a good question. Steve, I'm going to flip it back over to you, actually.
So there are people in UX or engineering or who say, hey, I think I'd like to be a product manager. How do I get a job, right? And it's almost impossible to go to a new company as a product manager unless you have been a product manager. So for those who wish to move into this role, try to do it within your current employer. So when I was a sales engineer is a good example. I'm not saying this is the only way, but coming from the sales side of the house, because of my sales engineering background, I was doing really well with product when I was in sales, and I put together sales training. And perhaps sales should be doing its own training, but manager should have been doing it, but the product manager was too busy with development. And so when product management was to move from sales to product management within the same company, on from there. And I think that's really the struggle most people have, is that they can't get into it within their company. They're hoping to get into it by changing companies. And it doesn't, it's very rare that you can change companies and roles in the same transaction.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. What about students and people from like boot camps?
In my experience, hiring managers want experience. If a hiring manager had two identical candidates and one had a boot camp and one didn't, maybe. I know that the training vendors all like to talk about certification and how important that is. That seems to be important only to and to people who are trying to get into product management. Think, hey, if I spend $1,000 or $3,000 on some certification, that'll get me a job. And that doesn't seem to be happening in real life.
I have continuously said that, and I love that he's calling that out, Santi, because it's literally what I said to Christina the other day about how that's what people are preaching on LinkedIn and like trying to sell coaching services off of it, things like that. But it doesn't mean diddly squat in real life. It doesn't mean anything.
Even in my case, I suppose, my potential boss, the VP of marketing, saw me doing product management work. And frankly, what we would now call product marketing. I think of those as two sides of the same coin. Product management tends more about the product and the user, and product marketing tends to be more about the sales channel and the buyer, maybe. But lately, over the last 15 years, we've seen a lot of product management working only with development. And so product marketing, in many cases, expands to say, well, somebody's got to do strategy around here. And so they're taking on a lot of the strategic role that used to be done by product managers.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, just about how you've seen the role change over time. So I'm sure you've seen it go this way and then that way and then up, down, what have you. I'd love to see, know what the biggest changes you've seen since starting in product to today's age of product management and what that looks like.
I think it was pretty well established in the mainframe days. And a lot of mainframe companies or software vendors for, big iron evolved pretty well to, we went to servers and the internet and such. But it was like the personal biz threw everything, start over. And so maybe it was there, but certainly in the 80s and the 90s, it was a business role. And then certainly, once Agile started hitting us, we saw a lot more technical implementation. And over the last 5 years, I've seen more and more people taking on the business role that thing was in the first place. A company had a server crash, and they lost a lot of customer data. And they were able to get most of it back and whatever. And one of the older product managers said, well, have we ever run a disaster recovery drill? And they went, what's that? And he reached back on his bookshelf and pulled off an IBM Red Book from like 1970 called Disaster Recovery Planning. And it was all the procedures for it. And it's like the internet companies and the PC companies said, oh, those mainframe people doing. And, we need to be new and fresh and agile. And yet a lot of computing since, World War II, right? And, I think every generation thinks they've invented everything from scratch, right? So anyway, that was a long rambling answer to it seems to swing back and forth between, is this a business role or is this a technical role?
You kind of like lose foundations, but then come back to them with product management. It's like you're just swinging.
Mm-hmm. And there was a case a couple of years ago that was not funny, but it was amusing or something. The company said, well, I don't understand what product managers do. So they fired all the product managers, deleted the whole department. 3 months later, they called all those product managers and begged them to come back, because now in the intervening period, they found it all the product managers do. And it's not just allowed to development from Jira or, getting a PDF in the hands of the sales rep. It's that person who's looking across the entire company at friction for internal departments, for buyers, for users, for customer success, for customer support, looking at the health of the product throughout the entire life cycle. And they were like, oh yeah, that would have been a good thing to have. So even when, we say we don't need as many product managers as we have, most companies come around to realizing how critical that role is.
For sure. Santi, I know you have that one question left that you want to ask, but before you do that, I just want to ask Steve if there's anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure you talk about, because we only have about 10 minutes left.
I think I'd just like to come back and chat with you specifically about Quartz sometime, because I feel like that's not a 5-minute answer.
Yeah, for sure.
Inserting a little pause here. Instead of thinking about what features we need or getting involved in the creation of technology, we really need to make sure we're clear on who it is, who it's for, what problems it solves, and then leave it to the technical people to make those technical decisions. Leave communications people to make the communications decisions. Be the business manager of the product. Or maybe we should change the title from product manager to problem manager.
Problem manager.
Mic drop.
Ooh.
I like that.
Ooh. I like that. Folks, leave a comment. I think that is a very interesting take to have on that. But it's not wrong, right? Like, as ultimately we're trying to find problems which I identify problems that are worth, solving and that will make money. You marry all those things together. So that's, yeah. I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my last question that I throw everybody off with is, Steve, what is your red flag as a product person?
If I were a product, what would I see as a red flag?
No, what's your personal one? What's something you do that you know is a red flag, but it is what it is?
Well, I'm not sure which answer to give you. So I'll give you 2 answers and you can edit it later.
Yeah.
One personal behavior I have is sometimes I have to head to the solution because I know how to do something, and I start telling other people how to do the thing because I know better than they do, and it invariably gets me in trouble. So there's a bad behavior. But the thing that always sets me off personally is typos. When I see a website with typos or an image that was clearly a screen because there's squiggle line in the PowerPoint thing they were working. Whenever I see mistakes like that, I just go, what is your product? How much care, if you're putting this little care into whatever you've put in front of me, what kind of care have you taken into the software itself? So when somebody posts, even a job description, it's like, hey, there's an opportunity at my company. Here's the job description. And I look and like half the words in this post are misspelled. I'm like, I'm not pursuing this at all. So I guess the bottom line is I really do judge people for their grammar and their spelling. In today's
that's just like,
it's got a red squiggle, man.
I feel like that's just really like an attention to detail thing at like the macro level. And I feel like that's really important for our roles to have good attention to detail. So I think like although you're narrowing it in to grammar or just like spelling issues, I think what you're really judging is attention to detail, which is really important for a product manager to have good attention to detail.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, or are we going to build a feature that when you click on it doesn't do what it's expected to do or forgets about the other 15 areas of the product that it impacts? So I think that attention to detail is incredibly important. And so I would highlight attention to detail as a really important thing for a product manager to have. And Santi, I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes total sense. I'm including both your answers in this episode, Steve. Just so you know. I love that.
So I don't know if this is a good wrap up or not, but one I see is we keep breaking everything down into like tasks. And as Meagan said a moment ago, attention to detail, where a task works one way in one part of the product and a different way in another part of the product. Or, a simple way, it's like right click does something in Outlook, but it doesn't do it in like that consistency. I mean, across like an entire portfolio. But, I have a couple of SaaS products that I use where the dialogue works one way in this part of the product and an entirely different way in that part. And that's not really, I mean, product management could identify the friction, but it really is an absence of an overarching architecture and design schema, that when we're doing this thing, we do it in this way. So as a result, some of the products that we encounter are hodgepodges of design standards, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Meg and I both have seen software that we've used and been like, okay, what?
Yeah. We're complainers too. We love to send those back and forth to each other like, what is going on?
Well, maybe some of that's your QA background. I mean, QA people are insane.
Thank you. I say that to her all the time.
They see stuff that I don't see. I mean, when I look, like when there's a thing I'm testing or looking at, if it says put in your phone number, I put in my phone number. But you put in elephant or 100,000 zeros. I mean, the mindset that you need to be a QA person, unlike any other that I've seen, it's like, a man walks into a bar, he orders 1 beer, he orders 0 beers, he orders -1 beers, he orders a wagon of beers, and the mindset of the craziness of QA, which is different, I think, than the craziness of UX or the craziness of development.
Yeah, software people are just crazy. But yeah, the TLDR of that is software people are crazy, but we do really cool things. So having you on this podcast was amazing. So thank you so much, Steve, for jumping in and sharing all of these insights. Definitely would love to have you back for a part 2. So we'll be in touch about that. And again, just thank you so much for your time. I know our listeners are absolutely going to love this episode and get a lot of insights from you.
Super. I was glad to be here, and I'd be glad to come
Yes.
back.
Thank you so much. We look forward to that.